Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new clipping album, Visions of Bodies Being Burned. And before we get to the rest of the review, yes, I shaved. It's weird. It's weird for me too. Clipping are an LA-based industrial hip-hop, noise hip-hop, experimental hip-hop trio who, honestly, for a while, I wasn't that into. I never really got into their mid-city EP of an intro. Honestly, I just didn't think it sounded very good, and I know that was kind of the point. They were trying to do this deconstructed hip-hop thing. Honestly, I just thought it sounded like crap. And for me, a guy that's listened to a lot of abrasive, noisy hip-hop from the likes of Death Grips, Shabazz Palaces, and a lot weirder and noisier, I just didn't get clipping at first. Honestly, it took me years to enjoy their 2014 self-titled debut album. I mean, for me, it's still not my favorite in these genres, but the performances on their self-titled album are much more impressive. The amount of swagger on this album is pretty ridiculous. Now, Splendor and Misery, I thought had some cool ideas and an interesting narrative, but for me, honestly, it was harder for me to get into clipping more than usual here. I thought it was very hit and miss. But out of nowhere, in 2019, there existed an Addiction to Blood album. I instantly got on board with clipping, and that just might be the horror fan in me and the much darker, much more horrorcore elements of this album, but for me, I feel like I finally got it. So much so that it actually really hurt me when I just didn't have time to review it. It was grim, it was grisly, it wasn't campy though, it was just perfect for October, which it came out in. Now, at first, I didn't enjoy a lot of the singles that were coming out of this album at first, but they've grown on me, and I really hope to enjoy this album. Let's chat about it. I'm just going to cut to the chase. Overall, this might be my favorite clipping project. Say the name, like I said, when I first heard it, wasn't that into it. It took me a little while to grow, but honestly, I love it now. It's on the more low-key side in a weird way. It almost sounds like something that would have popped up on their self-titled album. But I'm genuinely shocked with how twisted this is. It's pretty wild how far they've gone into this more horrorcore theme. Including this album, it's only been 2 albums they've been doing this, but they sound like they've been doing it for years. But the horror this time around, I don't know, it just seems a lot closer to home, not as manufactured, very real. And the repeated chorus here is just so hypnotic. I love this. Something underneath, on the other hand, is just so freaking tense. The atmosphere is ridiculously suffocating. The production is very impressive. Not only that, but as far as a performance goes, this might be my favorite Daveed Diggs performance here. He sounds fired up. Honestly, it's one of the most must-listen-to recordings on this album. It just reminds you of the trio's technique. Make Them Dead is a serious wake-up call. I didn't even need one, but it is. It is just so harsh on the ear, so abrasive, so noisy. But I think it just sounds fine here, actually. It has a place on this album. It's so dark, it's so twisted, and that chanting in the background really makes this come full circle. It is intense. I feel like I've wandered into some weird religious underground ceremony where I have no idea what's going on whatsoever, and it's exciting as hell. She Bad, on the other hand, is just so freaking hard to pinpoint between the obtuse flows and the weird synths and the bizarre horns here. This is very hard to pinpoint. It works, though, for clipping. Once again, Daveed Diggs' incredibly hypnotic flow put up against this very unsettling backdrop is a lot to take in. It actually has me a whole lot more on the edge of my seat than I thought I would be at this album. And by the end of this track, it's just so monolithic, in your face. Check the Lock is one of my favorite deep cuts here. I love the desolate feel to this track. It just sounds so final. Not for nothing, the atmospheres, the tense atmospheres on this entire album are really fantastic, not cheap at all. But I digress here. Once again, the horror behind this track, the terror of this track just sounds so close to home, no pun intended. It's wildly good. Eaten Alive, once again, pretty awesome. I love just how gritty and dingy and dark this comes off in a weird way. This beat here almost sounds like something the Hacks and Cloak would have done years ago. Once again, super off kilter, but not in a weird kind of way. It actually makes me pay more attention to what clipping is doing. It's just so hypnotic. And overall, this has been a super visual album, but this track in itself is just so freaking visual. Paints a picture like no other track here, actually. Body for the Pile might be the noisiest track here. Like, this is harsh. But at this point, I think they've actually incorporated this to this new sound of theirs very nicely. Here, this just comes off like abrasive ear candy. They have this down to a science. The amount of charisma here, once again, is staggering. By the end of this track, the horror, once again, is just staring you right in your face. Very current track, very realistic. And Enlacing is my favorite track here. I I love how hauntingly beautiful this track starts off, but it's just instantly crushed by this huge, beefy beat. Ironically, there's some weird witch house vibes to this, like Salem could definitely have looked towards this for their new album. Spoiler alert. It's freaking awesome though. At parts, it does have a sort of modern flair to it. But the fact of the matter is, for the majority of this album, I think Clipping have finally, really gotten on a good stride as far as my tastes go. Even a lot of the smaller details here, like the interludes, I feel like Clipping have really done a really great job of nailing them. The intro to this album is masterful. It's tense, it's atmospheric, it's seriously incredibly eerie. Then we have David crashing in with this explosive verse, ending off with the iconic "It's Clipping, bitch," and all of the harsh noise you could want. It is awesome. The Witchboard interlude, on the other hand, sounds like it was ripped out of the absolute cheesiest, campiest 80s horror movie, and I honestly love that. And the Invocation interlude, while not as flashy, shows that Clipping have a serious eye for little details right now. The Drove interlude is disappointing, though. I guess they can't all be winners. And honestly, Secret Peace as an instrumental finale here does let me down quite a bit. The atmosphere is absolutely there, but sadly, it's one of the least effective instrumentals on this entire album, and just lets me, crave some more, but not in the good way. Now, like I said, this overall, I think I would say is my favorite Clipping project. However, there are some still awkward moments here that I'm not that into. I was just not that into 96 Neve Campbell, even though I tried. I tried hard. I don't know, I just feel like this track kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. More than anything, I feel like this is like a deconstructed sound of their first album. I just feel like they've done so much better on this album. For me, I feel like they're beyond this. Pain Every Day actually has the intensity that I've been loving about this album. It's super tense, it's very dark, but I don't know, listening to this track, I don't get the same feeling of dread. The songwriting here just is not what I look for. Now, I will say this is far from the worst track here because Diggs really does have an incredibly charismatic performance on this track. But still, for me, not a knockout. And Looking Like Meat actually really had my hopes pretty high going into it. I was interested from a mile away because horror's music we're featured on here have always been something that I've wanted to get into. But the production on this track is the most unflattering of this entire album. And it's a shame because lyrically this is an absolute blast and honestly just as impressive as the rest of this album. It's just the right amount of campy and visceral, but the production here, I can't really look around that. However, outside of that, I think this might just be my favorite Clipping album. I don't know how they've done it or how they've gotten here, but to be honest, I feel like this more horror themed, whether it be a more realistic one this time around, this horror theme that they're going for, I feel like they're really hitting a stride here, at least with me. And that just might be because I'm a fan of darker music and a lot of horror stuff, but honestly, I've never had this much fun with Clipping before. And yes, there are some awkward moments on here still, but I don't know, man, this direction that they're going in, honestly, it's making it a lot easier for me personally to enjoy a lot of the music of Clipping. I'm loving this. I'm feeling a light 8 on this thing, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.